That brings us then to petition number 2116 to accelerate the implementation of bus franchising powers. This petition has been lodged by Ellie Harrison on behalf of Better Buses of Strathclyde. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to improve the process for implementing the bus franchising powers contained in the Transport Scotland Act 2019 by introducing without delay the regulations and statutory guidance required to give bus franchising powers full effect, amending the 2019 Act to remove the requirement for proposed franchising frameworks to be approved by a panel appointed by the Traffic Commissioner, instead empowering regional transport partnerships to have the final say on approving proposals, and providing additional funding to help support RTPs in preparing franchising frameworks and assisting them with initial set-up costs once frameworks are approved. And I would just remind those of us joining us today of the remarks I made a moment ago about campaigning material, all of which seems to have quietly moved into camera shot in the duration of the short interval that we've had. We have been joined by our everyone. I like a little bit of pantomime myself, so we'll pass. Never have guessed, Mr. Harvey. We'll pass on quickly to the colleagues we have, welcoming the colleagues who have joined us to consider this petition this morning. We have the aforementioned Patrick Harvey and Paul Sweeney. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
We last considered this petition on the 27th of November 2024, where we agreed to write to the 7 statutory regional transport partnerships, Confederation of Passenger Transport, Bus Users Scotland, the Traffic Commissioners for Scotland, the B Network in Greater Manchester, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, Transport for Wales, UK Ministers, the Law Society of Scotland and key bus operators in Scotland. I'm sure some of those suggestions were made to us by Mr. Sweeney at the time, who's never short of a list of people we might like to contact. Many of the submissions we received recognised the value of franchising, although several of them highlighted work to explore more appropriate avenues within the broader, and I quote, toolbox for options for improving bus provisions, unquote, included in the Transport Scotland Act of 2019. Some submissions suggest that no one model would fully satisfy local needs, and indeed that bus franchising is less likely to be the most appropriate option for rural areas. Views were mixed on the petition asked to remove the requirement for proposed franchising frameworks to be approved by a panel appointed by a traffic commissioner. S Western supports this, while SPT recognises that the process is now enshrined in law and expresses some concern that any change may result in further significant delay and introduce more risks to the local or any local transport authority considering a franchising framework. The Confederation for Passenger Transport Scotland argues against a local transport authority approving its own proposal and suggests more robust guidance regarding panel members as a better solution. Now, many welcomed the reintroduction of the Bus Infrastructure Fund for 25-26. The Confederation of Passenger Transport Scotland argues that any financial support provided to Scotland's local transport authorities must consider all options to meet local needs. The Net Zero and Transport Committee undertook extensive scrutiny of this issue, including in terms of the secondary legislation asked for by the petition, with the last regulations introduced ahead of the summer recess. In response to the NZET convener dated 25th of June, the Minister for Agriculture and Connectivity explained that the draft statutory guidance was undergoing an internal review ahead of final engagement with stakeholders, and the Minister added that final timescales for publication, and I quote, will depend on the capacity of these stakeholders to consider and engage with the draft document. The Minister also indicated that the Government has no plans to modify the franchising process, arguing that the current model, and again quote, provides for rigorous scrutiny of local transport authority franchising proposals to safeguard the protection of passengers and the wider bus network from potential damage of a poorly developed franchise. So before inviting colleagues on the committee to consider how we might proceed in the light of all I have said, I will invite both of those colleagues who are joining us this morning to make some comments to the committee, and I'll invite Patrick Harvey to speak first.
Thank you very much, Convener. Good morning. And I appreciate that you've asked us to be tight for time and also that you're focused on deciding whether to keep petitions open in the hope of substantial progress in the remaining time available within this session. I'd like to make the case that there is an argument for urgency around getting some clarity during the current session on how we move forward with this. The committee is very well aware from its previous consideration that Parliament has already legislated in favour of allowing a local approach to franchising, that it is Scottish Government policy to allow a local approach to develop franchising. And what's been announced very recently is SPT have decided to press ahead with their proposals on franchising. So in the area that I represent, this is a matter of parliamentary consent, national government policy and local intention. And SPT's consultation showed a very, very strong public support for this. 83% of their consultation showed that people were not satisfied with the current situation and wanted to support franchising as an approach. In fact, the loudest voices that are against this are simply from those who've made themselves very, very wealthy by operating the current system that doesn't have public support and isn't meeting people's needs. So we have national policy, we have legislative parliamentary agreement to allow this to take place. We have local intention and we have public support, but we still have significant barriers in the way. Notwithstanding the recent decision that the convener referred to around the regulations, there remain barriers to progressing a franchising model and a lack of clarity about the degree of political and financial support that will be available from central government to enable us to make progress. If we don't get some clarity and some clear recommendations before the end of this session, I fear there's a real risk that we're going to be into the 2030s before people in Scotland, including in the area I represent, are able to benefit from Scotland moving forward to catch up with those other parts of the UK that are already well ahead of us on operating bus services in the public interest. So I would ask the committee whether to make recommendations themselves or to refer this back to NZ and seek a clear and specific set of recommendations about how the next session of Parliament will remove the barriers and provide the support that is necessary to enable much more rapid progress.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. Mr Sweeney.
Thank you, Convener, and it's a pleasure to join you again in support of this petition. I think the unanimity the SPT has shown in progressing the Strathclyde Regional Bus Strategy with the support of parliamentarians across the region demonstrates the level of public will to see a bus franchise implemented across Strathclyde and particularly in the Greater Glasgow urban core. But there are constraints facing the Regional Transport Authority in implementing the franchise that has been identified by the petitioner, particularly the resource constraints faced by SPT. So SPT have estimated 15 million to complete the complex processes set out in the Act, though of course if the Act were simplified, as the petitioner has recommended or suggested, in line with the 2017 Act in the rest of the UK, that cost could be reduced. So SPT have set aside £12 million in reserves to finance that work, but then between 28 to 31 they estimate £100 to £200 million to roll out bus franchising. So clearly there are resource constraints that may delay the implementation of the franchise that hasn't really been addressed, and particularly in context of the Strategic Transport Projects Review, which the Government has identified Clyde Metro as a major investment priority. Bus franchising clearly is a factor that will underpin an effective Clyde Metro. So there is a need to move this forward at pace, because the Transport Authority needs to get ahead and the Government needs to be in synchronicity with the Transport Authority in the region to allow this to be delivered at pace. We can't waste any more time with this. We've already had a delay, significant delays relative to other major British cities in getting bus franchising on the ground. So my suggestion is that the petition consider bringing the Transport Minister in to inquire about this in detail, about the issues of resourcing the franchising process, simplification of the legislation where appropriate, and potentially also consider a referral, like my colleague Mr Harvey suggested, to the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee, which I do understand does have some capacity before dissolution to consider this in more detail. So there could be a collaborative opportunity between this committee and the NZ committee.
Thank you. Colleagues will note that we have, of course, have enjoyed the presence of the convener of the said committee with us during our consideration of matters this morning. Do colleagues have any suggestions as to how we might proceed in the light of the responses we've received and also the appeals that have been made to us? Mr. Russell, sorry, just
if we dive into this at present, when the funding isn't secure, I think we could be in very thin ice. You know, I think that for a proposal to go ahead, I think you need to make sure that the funding's secured to sustain this, because it is a change, significant change. I think that's there's no point unless the funding is secured.
Thank you. Mr. Ewing?
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, plainly, you can't press the button on a project until you really are certain as to what it's going to cost, what the design will be, and what the timescale is. This building is an example of what can go wrong if you try to go ahead prematurely instead of festina lente, as the Romans may have said. However, it's been brought to my attention by McGill's, who have made a submission that they say, and I have no judgment on this, no prior knowledge of this, but they say that the experts have costed the funding requirements for the SPT case for between 45 million to 400 million. Now, I would imagine that our colleagues here would disagree with that, but the fact that they aver that experts say that that's the case would mean that were we to take this further, convener, I think we would really have to do a very full investigation, and I don't honestly think that we have the capacity or the time to do that with the best will in the world. It's just a matter of fact. Between now and the next year, we don't have the time to take evidence from all the people that would be required. So given that there is serious doubt about the cost, about the amount of money, given the severe pressures on finance, I think it's been pointed out there's a massive shortfall for local government finance. And given the people that are losing their jobs at the moment from some local authorities who may regard their jobs as a greater priority than a scheme which hasn't yet been costed, I can't really see that we can do much today other than urge the petitioners to come back to the next Parliament and continue to press the government and work with SPT and other colleagues to try to devise a solution.
I imagine it was a late submission we received from McGill's, but I imagine they might be one of the parties to whom Mr. Harvey was referring earlier. I'll say that just because he might have been trying to catch my eye otherwise. Any other colleagues want to? Maurice Golden?
I do think we should close the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that, as Mr Ewing has highlighted and Mr Davies highlighted, such a move would require funding, and moreover, the Scottish Government has reiterated there is no plan to modify the current franchising process. But I think in closing we should kind of do two things. One is write to the Net Zero Committee. It's helpful that the convener is present today, and well, they will once we've written to him, and also highlight to the petitioner that there is an opportunity to submit a new petition in the next parliamentary session.
I think this is actually quite an interesting petition, which is the reason that it's attracted a considerable degree of interest and engagement. The Scottish Government has reiterated that it's got no plans to modify the current franchising process. So, there doesn't seem to be any movement from the Government at this point on the issues, on that aspect of the issue contained within it. And I hear what colleagues say. I'm just trying to say, is it our view that it's unlikely we can take this forward, but that there may be still aspects of it that another committee of the Parliament might be able to pick up on in the lifetime of this Parliament, and that therefore we would write, as Mr Golden suggests, to the convener of that committee in that regard, while closing the petition, and potentially suggest to the petitioners that this might be something that it would be useful to return to Parliament with in the next session. We only have something like half a dozen further meetings of the committee, so we are quite constrained. Are we agreed? Well, I think we are. I know it's not entirely the outcome our colleagues would have wished for. But I think, and I will just, in view as I'm slightly reluctant with our own conclusion, invite Mr Harvey, who I think is keen to come back.
I'm very grateful. I would acknowledge what you said about the government's stated intention that they don't wish at the moment to make changes to the legislative and regulatory process. The convener and other members will recall that the vote on, in Parliament on those regulations was on an absolute knife edge. So we have to accept that that decision has been made, but that a very, very strong counter case exists. But the petition I would draw attention to is not only about the regulatory and legislative framework, it's also about the level of resource and support that is necessary from government to allow the local intention and the local publicly supported intention to be taken forward. So there are aspects beyond the legislative and regulatory aspects which the government doesn't intend to make changes on, which will require further progress, will require movement from government, and I think the committee still has the opportunity to secure that movement in the last months of this session.
Or another committee might be able to do more than we can, given the limited scope there will be for us to return to the issues raised in the petition. I mean, I ordinarily wouldn't be inviting our colleagues to debate the matter with me, but Mr Sweeney?
It was just to draw the committee's attention to the fact that in June, the Chancellor of the Exchequer had announced a £15.6 billion investment in public transport for English city regions, with each receiving around £1 billion to £2.5 billion over the next 5 years to deliver or enhance bus franchising and deliver new bus infrastructure. And this would result in a Barnett consequential of approximately £1.3 billion. So it isn't as fatalistic, perhaps, as the committee may have assumed initially. There is a significant envelope of investment that we aren't aware of what the government's going to do with. So perhaps it could be an opportunity for this committee or the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee to drill into exactly what the government's intentions are with that consequential in terms of particularly Strathclyde's well-advanced proposals for bus franchising, so that they can perhaps catch up with those city regions. And it may be prudent for the committee to hold the petition open until they at least receive a response from the Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee about their intended way to proceed.
I have this dreadful feeling that my sympathy in these matters is drawing me deeper into an abyss. Is Mr Mountain trying to catch my eye?
I was indeed, and I don't know if I have, Convener. If I have, can I just say that I hear, and I've heard these calls in the committee before, and I can't answer at the moment, but there is no capacity whether we can do it, but there is no capacity that I can see in the committee's programme between now and the end of Parliament. So realistically, I would suggest that you may wish to write to the committee and the committee will consider it. But I'm gently saying that we have a climate change plan which is behind schedule. We have carbon budgets still to agree. We have an ecocide bill coming along the way already in the committee. And I don't want to discourage people from doing things, but realistically, Convener, the problems this committee faces on petitions are multiplied, I would suggest, on the Net Zero Committee because of the lateness of the climate change plan.
Okay. I mean, I think reluctantly I am coming to the view that if that is the case, that given the limited time we've got, the route will have to be that we invite the petitioners to bring a fresh petition to the next session of Parliament. And I don't say that, you know, happily, but I think that's the conclusion I'm drawn to. I'm not sure that exercising the suggestion of writing to the NZET committee is going to, is going to progress matters. So are colleagues content with, reluctantly, with that position? So I am sorry, and I do apologise to the petitioner, and that would be our strong recommendation. But I feel we are kind of boxed in this particular issue because there are one or two other petitions still open that I think we can very directly make progress on, and it would be at their expense were we not now to have to come to some difficult decisions. So I thank everybody for their contribution and all of that, but I think that is the decision of the committee.